Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Maverick News channel. So much going on tonight, and a lot of it breaking news as of this hour. We'll bring you up to date on what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz, where Trump has not yet kept his promise to open the strait. Seems to align with what I was saying last night. The ceasefire is kind of fake. We'll dig into that a little bit more. Maybe even bigger news, and I think in many respects it is, which is why it is our thumbnail and lead story in our YouTube and other social media platform descriptions, including over on Rumble. UN condemning an alleged drone strike from Russia that hit Romania, and NATO on red alert as a result of all of that. So we'll bring you up to date on all of that as well, because the war of words, the rhetoric, the propaganda, and the saber rattling all reaching a new fever pitch, escalating to a whole new level, to a point where it feels far more serious tonight than it really ever has before, because I think Russia is growing and Putin is growing increasingly frustrated. Also, separatists and pro-Canadian demonstrators marching in the streets of Alberta today. The separatist controversy, the Alberta independence debate, also reaching a new level, as I would say in some respects tonight, the summer campaign on both sides of that issue kicking off. And it's already igniting real deep emotional responses, not just in Alberta, but across the country. So we'll dig into that a little bit as well. And we will have a Maverick Midnight Matinee special feature at the end of tonight's program, as we do usually on Friday nights. And tonight's feature will be a presentation that will tie directly into, well, not directly, but it will relate to what is going on out in Alberta. Stay with me. We have a lot to share with you tonight, right here on Maverick News.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are Maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, hang on here a second. I need to fix something on my screen. There we go. So let's start tonight with this situation in Romania, because this one at this moment seems to have the most potential to escalate and spiral even further out of control. Hearing so much especially from the Russian side over the past 24 hours. A lot of saber rattling. It all began, well, I shouldn't say it began, but this new chapter really sort of began with this drone hit in Romania, both sides with two very different stories on this. Now, why is a drone hitting an apartment building in Romania? That's at the core of the issue. Here's what it looked like. Now, we talked about this last night, but since then, the whole situation has become an escalated international incident because Romania is a NATO country. Now, it has not triggered Article 5 at this point. The drone strike under investigation, conflicting takes on this. United Nations, let's go there first. They have condemned the attack. Was it an attack? Was it accidental? This is what we are trying to determine, or they are. Here's the statement, the news release of sorts through the United Nations news publication, Global Perspectives, Human Stories, they say. World News in Brief. Drone strike in Romania condemned. Lebanon and South Sudan updates. So, according to Romanian authorities, the Russian drone entered Romanian airspace before crashing into the roof of an apartment building, sparking a fire on the 10th floor. The incident marks the first time since the start of the war in Ukraine that a Russian drone has struck a residential building inside a NATO member state. Although multiple drones have reportedly strayed into Romanian airspace on previous occasions since the invasion began in 2022. The statement reads, "We strongly condemn any attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure wherever they occur," said UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric, speaking to reporters at the regular noon briefing in New York. Romania's response: Romania has called the incident a serious violation of international law and urged NATO Defense Pact members to accelerate the transfer of anti-drone capabilities to strengthen its defenses. In response, NATO condemned what it described as Russia's recklessness and pledged to continue bolstering its defenses against emerging threats. Russia has neither confirmed or denied responsibility for the drone, reportedly saying that an examination of the aircraft needs to be conducted. That's the state of things tonight, sort of, but I thought, you know what we better do? We better go take a look at Russian state media to see what they are saying about this. Here's the headlines over on RT. Drone strikes residential building in Romania. Romania's defense ministry claimed that the UAV, this is the headline on RT, Russia Today, which injured two people in the city of Galați, came from Russia. It says here, a drone crashed into an apartment block in eastern Romania near the Ukrainian border on Friday, injuring two people, emergency services said. True. According to the Regional Emergency Services Department, a drone carrying explosives struck the 10th floor on the building, sparking a fire. Around 70 residents were evacuated. Catalin Sion, a spokesman for the Galați Emergency Services, said two people were hospitalized with minor injuries, while two others are treated for panic attacks. Firefighters, police officers, and a bomb squad are working at the scene. A video posted on social media purports to show the mode of the strike. We've shown you that. The Romanian Defense Ministry later released a statement claiming that the drone originated from Russia and was involved in strikes in Ukraine. Moscow has not yet commented on the matter. Well, they sort of have through state media here and elsewhere and through online streamers who are pro-Russian. Romania has repeatedly accused Russia of violating its airspace with drones during the most recent incident in April, Romanian officials said a UAV damaged a house and an electrical pole near Galați. Moscow denied the allegations, arguing there is no definitive proof that the drones were Russian. Several suspected Ukrainian drones have veered into, they're going to blame Ukraine. Okay. So that's the way it works. Deny, point the finger, blame the other side. Everybody's doing it. How do you know it's real? It's the fog of war. It continues. It escalates. And if it was Russian, was it intentional? Was it accidental? Don't know. Let's go to the, let's not do the Truth Social scroll. Let's go to X. There's plenty of material on there right now that will help us get up to date with a broader perspective, hopefully get closer to the truth. I don't know if we will get there or not, because there's so much, well, junk on X and also a lot of good stuff too. So let's bring it up. Here we go. Here's Igor Shushko. Says Russia attacks NATO member Romania. All European NATO leaders immediately excuse the Russian military attack and targeted civilians as accidental on Russia's behalf, despite Russia not claiming that it was an accident. Odd, right? Deputy Chairman of Russia's Security Council, Medvedev, confirms the attack on NATO and tells Europeans, shut up, this is just the beginning. Says more attacks on NATO are coming. It's time for some European NATO members to give Russia some of their land and people in the name of peace, as they'd been pressuring Ukraine to do for 12 years. According to them, there is no military solution when Russia attacks, only negotiations. Says, get on it, you cowards. So somebody there is a hawk. Again, the video. Bring it up. So NATO has been meeting, emergency meetings on this. But because it is not clear at this point if it was intentional or accidental, and it looks like it may have been accidental, and even if it was intentional, I'm not sure that Romania or that any of the NATO countries want to call that out, because I'm not sure that they actually want escalation. Here's RT again, statement here from Russia's envoy to Romania. He says, no evidence drone in Romania was of Russian origin, even though Romania says it was. He says Kyiv is trying to drag Romania and NATO into a war with Russia. So this is just typical back and forth propaganda, clouding reality, and we don't know. We pick a side, I guess. Let's let it roll.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. Today, I have visited the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It said that it was allegedly a Russian drone. Unfortunately, they never provided any evidence. As usual, we often face such baseless claims saying that Russia allegedly violates Romania's airspace, but there are no specific confirmation or evidence. In fact, it seems that the decision to stop the Russian General Consulate in Constance was made before we could even provide our position. Our position is something that the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs was not interested in. They have their own concept, their own understanding of what has happened, and they believe in it. And they don't care about what the Russian side thinks about it. Meanwhile, there are serious reasons to believe that we are facing another provocation of the Kyiv regime, which is trying its best to involve NATO and Romania into a conflict with Russia, so as to move away attention from the terrorist attack in Starobelsk, where dozens have been killed, and to try and draw out of Europe more material and financial resources to continue its anti-Russia terrorist activities.
Hey, do you believe that? You think that Ukraine attacked Romania to drag them into the war? I doubt that. Stranger things have happened, but I doubt it. I think it was Russian. I don't think that there's much doubt about it. Here's Sky News with former U.S. Permanent Representative to NATO, Kurt Volker.
Do you feel NATO's response hasn't been strong enough?
Well, I think it's good insofar as it is about Article 5 and defending NATO territory. That's the right rhetoric. But it is not sufficient in terms of what Russia is doing in Europe, creating all of these security risks that then we are having to manage. We should be telling them to stop doing it.
The head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, described Russia's actions as crossing a red line. And this, I guess, adds to what you're saying. Without consequences, it's a meaningless statement, isn't it?
Well, I agree. And I think in that scenario, what the red line refers to is NATO's Article 5, that if you attack a NATO country deliberately, there will be a massive NATO response to protect that country and defeat the aggressor. The problem with that is that we have not yet done that. This is not the first time a Russian drone has hit NATO territory. In fact, in Poland, there is already someone killed by a Russian drone, and we've had multiple other incursions. And yet, while we say we'll defend every inch of NATO territory, so far we are not doing it. And I think this is a big message that NATO needs to convey back. We will do this.
So are you suggesting that we should now invoke Article 5 then? Does this reach the threshold?
Well, invoking Article 5 is slightly different because you're saying that we now feel that NATO has been deliberately attacked and we will defeat the aggressor. I wouldn't go that far today. But what I would say is that NATO needs to convey a message to Russia. We will take down anything that is flying into NATO airspace that is unwanted. And I would take it one step further, which is to say we have to coordinate this with Ukraine now. Ukraine has the airspace picture over their own territory. There's lots of flying objects there. And in order to protect NATO, we need to be coordinating Ukraine to make sure nothing flies into NATO airspace.
Yeah, I've been hearing stuff like that for a while, but there really hasn't been the political will on the NATO side to do that for fear of further escalation. So don't take down drones coming into your airspace because you don't want to get Russia upset. What have we been hearing, though, even here on this channel within the last few days, that there are powerful voices within the Kremlin who want to escalate things. They're even talking about possibly using nukes and possibly like tactical nukes, I think, and attacking actual NATO countries. We heard that in this program, knowing that there's a tug of war going on inside Russia, trying to convince Putin to either back off, start to pull out of this war, which has dragged on much longer than anyone expected, including Putin himself. And then there are others who say it's time to escalate and go straight after NATO targets to push the envelope. We've seen the same thing going on with the NATO side, where incrementally the attacks inside Russian territory have increased. And there were always people who were concerned that if any attacks took place inside Russia, that would result or provoke Russia to come back with an extremely strong response, up to and possibly even including a nuclear response. But it hasn't happened. So they keep testing the boundary line. And it's like, just a little bit of a drip, 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 drip. And we're getting that back now from the Russian side with a lot of the rhetoric there. The most bombastic rhetoric so far coming from Dmitry Medvedev, seen even inside Russia as not just a hawk, but maybe even a little bit extreme in his views and his rhetoric. He says here, you citizens of EU countries, you should realize your authorities have unilaterally entered into a war with Russia. So he's literally, again, accusing European Union countries of going to war with Russia. So he says, be vigilant and don't be surprised by anything. The peaceful sleep is over, but you know who to ask why. Here's La Stampa posting the drone, in quotation marks, the drone that fell on Romania is nothing compared to what Russia could unleash on Europe. It goes on, it says that threat came from Dmitry Medvedev, vice president of the Security Council of the Russian Federation. Further quote from Medvedev, the Euro-impotent are kicking up a fuss over a drone that hit a residential building in Romania. Obviously, it's necessary to establish who launched the drone, he wrote in a post on Telegram. He goes on with the quote, European nations are directly participating in the war against Russia, and no one even pretends otherwise anymore, he emphasized. There's blood on the hands of scum like Ursula, Merz, Macron, Starmer, and all the other repulsive parasites. So they'd better get used to it. This won't be the last time. There's a war going on, and the citizens of EU countries, as the population of a nation at war, shouldn't go to bed expecting peaceful nights. That is a direct threat, not just to strike. Well, I don't know what it means in terms of what they're going to strike, but clearly a message to European citizens in European countries saying it's all fair game now at this point. Let me go on here. He's posting here. This is DD Geopolitics, posting this in more thorough, in a more thorough form. Okay, so he says, but regardless, every EU country really ought to shut up about it. European nations are direct participants in the war against Russia, and nobody's even pretending otherwise anymore. Sure, they're using their Bandera-loving proxies to do all the fighting, but what difference does that make to us? European drones, drone parts, other weapons, not to mention intelligence data, are used in attacks on our country every single day. And because of that, our residential buildings get damaged and our civilians die. Just like with the terrorist attack on Starobelsk, the blood is on the hands of scumbags like Ursula Merz, Macron, Starmer, and all the other repugnant parasites. So they'd better get used to it. This won't be the last time there's a war going on, and citizens of EU countries, as the population of nations at war, shouldn't be going to sleep expecting peaceful nights, especially around drone factories supplying the Banderite forces. So shut your pie hole. You haven't seen anything yet. That said, all those European lowlifes, the idiot EU figureheads, he says, the little bureaucrats running that excuse for a union, know perfectly well how to end this war. So take it up with them. War Radar posting Kremlin hardliner Dmitry Medvedev threatens Europe, saying EU nations have entered into a war with Russia and warning Europeans the peaceful sleep is over. Is this really where it's going to come down to? Now, some people think that Medvedev is a hothead. Indeed, he seems to be, has been for quite a while, but he is an advisor, direct advisor to Vladimir Putin. And there are concerns out there. Now, Putin saying that Russia has never threatened European countries. That's not true, I don't think. Everything they're doing now is just to prolong the conflict and to justify the immense costs for their budgets and to continue milking the taxpayers, he says.
Russia has not threatened European countries. And everything they're doing now is just to prolong the conflict and to justify the immense costs for their budgets and to continue milking the taxpayers.
Anyway you slice it, this is really dangerous. You don't know if they mean it. How much of this is just rhetoric, words? How much of it do they actually mean? As the conflict continues, drags on, you get increasingly, you get closer and closer to actual action being taken, I fear. And he is definitely a hawk. Shut up. This is just the beginning. Extremely strong language. Medvedev on the Romanian drone strike. This from open source intel claimed it remains unclear whose drone was involved. Accused European leaders of responsibility. It is a threat. Make no mistake. And we just saw within the last week massive strikes on Ukraine, including through the use of, we're told, at least now 2 Oreshnik hypersonic missiles, not armed with nuclear warheads, but multiple independent re-entry vehicles. And when they come down at hypersonic speed, they deliver a devastating blow just because of the speed alone. Here it is here.
Збили, диви, як падало.
Блять, на нас! Твою мать! Блять!
Та не кричи.
Та тихо.
Each one of those light dots,
Збили, диви, як падало.
one of those multiple
Блять, на нас! Твою мать!
independent re-entry
Та не кричи.
warheads, not armed with a nuclear device in this case.
Збили, диви, як падало.
Блять,
Because
на
they come in
нас!
at such a high rate of speed, they don't need the impact alone delivers a huge level of damage. Wow. Beware. Be vigilant. Heads up. Dangerous times. See, and then you get this kind of rhetoric here. I can't read the name because it is in a different language, which I do not read. Arabic of some kind, maybe, I'm not sure. Anyway, it says Russian state TV presenter Sergei Karnikov confirmed that the attack on Romania was not accidental. He called for missile attacks on Poland and Romania and stated that NATO would be intimidated and would be unable to respond to Russia. Again, a voice from the hawk side in Russia. Says the fact that we cannot attack Rzeszów is our big misunderstanding. We need to strike for the sake of interest and see what happens. And this is exactly what we heard the other night on our live stream with Regis Tremblay, who told us that there are people in Russia inside, who have the ear of Putin, who are saying they need to attack maybe one of the smaller NATO targets in Europe and see what happens. And I said, please don't do that. I don't think you really want to test it. But this is the thing: the Russians have been, in their own way, contributing, chipping away, trying to actually break up NATO, using a variety of techniques, including some pretty intense propaganda and information warfare, and I'd say foreign political meddling as well. But they haven't really tested it at this point to see, because the United States is backing out of Europe, right? And you get the US out of there, everything kind of changes the whole situation. So this is why they've been sitting back waiting to see what happens with the NATO alliance. It seems because they're frustrated with what's going on in Ukraine. They've reached a new milestone, and they are thinking that maybe now is the time to escalate things for a variety of reasons. Maybe because they feel they have the manpower, the weaponry, or maybe because they're running out of weaponry and manpower, that they need to take action now. And they feel it might be time, I guess, some of these hawks, to see if the NATO alliance is still strong enough to survive an actual attack. Says we need to strike for the sake of interest and see what happens. Like, basically launch an attack on a NATO target and see if they step up. It's a dangerous game of chicken. Deliver a fine blow with the Oreshnik and see what the reaction will be. That's what we heard the other night from Regis. This is exactly this is the discussion that's been going on over there. So was this drone strike inside Romania accidental? Was it Ukraine striking? Was it a Ukrainian drone? I think it was Russian. All the evidence that has been laid out so far indicates that it's Russian, but nothing definitive. I'm open to any evidence that shows it was not Russian, but you listen to this rhetoric and then this happens just days later. Anyway, says deliver a fine blow with the Oreshnik and see what the reaction will be. What will you do, Poles? Will NATO declare war on us? Of course not. NATO will never dare to fight with us. Zezao is a logistics hub. It should simply be burned down. I spoke to a dozen people who are involved in war planning.
И совершенно точно я говорил с десятками людей, которые занимаются планированием боевых действий. Абсолютно.
They calculated absolutely accurately that Poland wouldn't do anything.
Точный расчет, ничего Польша не сделает. Умоется и
They will remain silent in humiliation and stop participating in this.
Просто перестанет в этом участвовать.
So he's telling you that Russia actually was responsible for these previous drone attacks and this one as well. He's saying it was Russia. And it's clear, he says, where the bases will be transferred, they will be transferred to Romania.
Ну, потому что это опасно. И понятно, куда переведут базы. Их переведут в Румынию. И логистические
But we will do the same with these
центры будут в
gypsies.
Румынии. С цыганами разберемся. Там уже будет проще.
It'll be easier there. The gypsies definitely won't be able to do anything.
Цыгане точно никуда не пойдут. То, что мы не можем нанести удар по Жешеву, я считаю, это наше большое недоразумение. Надо нанести просто ради...
We need to strike for the sake of interest and see what happens.
Интересно посмотреть, что будет. Вот.
Deliver a fine blow with the Oreshnik and see what the reaction will be. All right, so, man, I'm just telling you, this is super duper dangerous. This is new. Like, there's been a little bit of talk like this in the past, but no, this new level. Man. more images from the drone strike. See, if this does escalate, if they go after, like, it's clear that they're going after a NATO target, then who knows? Will Trump just abandon NATO? Will he abandon Europe at that point because he won't want to get involved? Or how will the American public respond? And that's a key part of this. I said, the other night, I don't think you want to test this. You should not be throwing fuel on that patriotic pilot light. That's a very dangerous thing to do, because once you ignite that, American patriotism is fierce. And right now, I think that from what I'm seeing on the Russian side, they're miscalculating where Americans actually stand on this, because the talk has been to attack not just European targets, but U.S. bases, or a U.S. base, a smaller one perhaps, inside Europe. And this, again, the video from the drone strike. So yeah, we've seen NATO convene this emergency meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte strongly condemning the attack, stating Russia's reckless behavior poses a danger to all of us. And the U.S. ambassador to NATO, Matt Whitaker, also condemning the attack. I'll bring this up. He posted on social media tonight. So here's Whitaker's post. U.S. Ambassador to NATO, we stand with our NATO ally Romania and condemn this reckless incursion on its territory. Our thoughts are with the injured in Galați. We will defend every inch of NATO territory. So already, right there, you're seeing a forceful, full-throated response from the United States ambassador to NATO. Well, Trump appoints these guys, so that's a Trump person, Trump appointee. I don't know if you want to test that pilot light of patriotism. I don't know. Vladimir Putin saying Western media openly deceiving its own people. Here's his statement in this news conference saying the media in the West is lie, but yeah, they lie sometimes, not all the time over here. I can vouch for that. I know. I've been on the inside. They don't just lie. But sometimes the government does, and that comes through the media. So I can tell you too that on both sides, governments lie. Forked tongues.
In every direction. And going back to Starobelt, I watch foreign TV channels from time to time to see what kind of a media landscape there is and what the international viewers have to watch. It's a disgrace. They're openly deceiving their citizens. When we made the strike in response to their atrocity against children, we struck the Kyiv region, and the Kyiv strike was covered from early morning to late at night. Russia's an aggressor. They caused so much destruction. You, as the media, I would say, should be ashamed for your colleagues. They didn't mention the tragedy in Starobelsk even once. The fact that children died, that it was a targeted attack against our children.
there was some coverage, not nearly as much, on that dormitory attack. And there were casualties there, and Russia is very upset about it. I did see reports on it, though. I did mention it here on this program. We spoke about it with Regis. But it was covered. It wasn't ignored. BBC, there were some reports on the U.S. side as well, but of course not nearly as prominent in the headlines. That much is true, but not that it was ignored, but no, it did not get as much coverage. That is for certain. Now, also something of note that may complicate things, reported over on TWZ, new counter-drone optimized Pantsir air defense system being deployed atop skyscrapers in Moscow. What does this mean? Well, it means that Russia, concerned that, Moscow increasingly vulnerable, they are vulnerable to drone attacks in like right at the capital, right in Moscow. So they've been installing beefing up their air defense systems, and they've been putting these surveillance systems on top of skyscrapers. However, the twist in all of this is that as soon as you do that, you put that kind of infrastructure atop civilian buildings, they become military targets legitimately, because they can then be targeted and taken out because they have a military application. A recent video, it says, out of Russia, once again highlights the drastic efforts being taken to provide Moscow with additional air defense coverage against the threat of long-range Ukrainian drones. This again from TWZ, where they say, while we have seen examples of the Pantsir short-range air defense system installed on buildings in Moscow before, the footage here shows the counter-drone optimized SMD-E variant being lifted onto the top of the skyscraper by helicopter. It says here, Russians using an Mi-26 heavy lift helicopter to deliver a Pantsir SMD-E air defense system onto the roof of the Nordstar Tower Business Center in downtown Moscow. And then the post here says, well, thanks, now everyone knows where the next Ukrainian drone is going to hit. Point being, again, you put that on top of that building, that piece of hardware is a military target. Now, I don't think that the intention is to put civilians in harm's way, but that's what they might be doing. Now, that's not to say Ukraine will attack it, will hit it, but according to the rules of engagement internationally, international law, the rules of war, it becomes a legitimate target. Again, it's escalating, it's complicated, it's increasingly dangerous. We have response coming in internationally, including from Canada. Here's the response from Prime Minister Carney tonight on this story. Where Carney posts, Canada stands with Romania and strongly condemns last night's reckless Russian drone incursion in Galați, which injured 2 people. Another escalation in Russia's unjust war of aggression against Ukraine. This incident is a serious violation of Romanian airspace and international law by Russia. Canada and our NATO allies remain ready to defend allied territory. And that's where we stand tonight on this story. Stay with me. When we come back, we'll start digging into the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. Hang in there.
Suits protect the victims. And also Donald Trump. Coincidence? Just dumb luck. Right? Another sealed file. That crocodile smile. We did our best, says the DOJ, while the truth just fades away. Another new spin. No one will win except the rich guys with gold ID cards and closets full of secrets behind steel bars. Just a little glitch. A billionaire's privilege. That's the sound of the case. Closed.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Also, just before we get into the stuff with Iran, one more piece of this story on the Russia-Ukraine war front. This is footage of a drone strike against the Project 11356 frigate Admiral Essen at the Novorossiysk naval base. This is back from the 23rd. I apologize for my poor pronunciation with my Can-Am, Kanakistani and American accent. I find it hard to wrap my tongue around some of these Russian words and place names. However, this shows, again, where the drone warfare has really gone to a whole new level. The first real true drone war in human world history. And here's a Ukrainian drone attacking a Russian ship. So keep in mind, too, again, this is Ukraine fighting the Russian Navy when Ukraine doesn't have a Navy. And they have taken out a lot of ships. So Russia's suffered a lot of damage on that front. They've denied a lot of that, but it's a real game changer, these drones, man, even with regard to fighter jets. And I think that everybody needs to be kind of thinking ahead even before spending a lot of money on arms, not just buying weapons the way that we used to. starting to think, you got to think in terms of where we're going to be a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. Even this F-35 purchase and the Gripen fighter jets, the Gripen, and I assume the F-35 will be doing this too, but the strategy different because the F-35 more stealthy, but the Gripen less expensive, and you use more of them and combine that with drones that fly alongside and in tandem with the fighter jets to expand the range of the surveillance, the radar, the detection systems, the targeting systems. It's a very complex system overall. So it's not like I think in people's minds, we're still stuck in World War II, where you're thinking about dogfights and P-51 Mustangs going up against, adversaries, and or Corsairs going up against Japanese Zeros and dogfights. And it's not like that anymore. It's much more complex. Okay, let's take a look what's going on the Strait of Hormuz, because Trump posted yesterday, said Strait of Hormuz is going to open. We've been hearing for 2 days now that the ceasefire is going to be extended. They had basically a deal all worked out, written. All that had to happen was the final signatures to be applied, and it was all going to result in the Strait of Hormuz being reopened, and Trump was going to get all these concessions from Iran as a prelude of even better things to come. And I posted last night, and I said all the indications are that not really a whole lot has changed, and that the ceasefire that he's going to extend hasn't been a ceasefire at all. Indeed, it has been a fake ceasefire, because they keep on firing at each other. And even tonight, apparently, Iran has fired warning shots at vessels trying to transit through the Strait of Hormuz, because it is still not open. At least it wasn't a few moments ago. Let me just check. I'm going to check again. But while Trump kept posting and posting, saying it was going to open, I don't think it has. Just checking for the latest, most up-to-the-minute information. I bet you it hasn't. And the answer is no. The Strait of Hormuz is still not fully open, effectively still restricted and closed to normal commercial shipping, which has been the case since late February due to this ongoing U.S.-Israel-Iran conflict. Traffic far below normal levels, only a handful of ships per day getting through these ongoing risks of mines, blockades, insurance issues. Negotiations are apparently, we're told, at an advanced stage, but not finalized. Trump, again yesterday, getting out in front of his own skis, saying that the strait is going to open, saying that the strategy of the U.S. blockading the strait has worked, and that the U.S. is in complete control. Not true. Gigantic lie. I don't know if the media lies all the time, but Trump seems to. U.S. and Iranian negotiators, were told, reached a draft deal for this 60-day ceasefire extension to gradually reopen the strait. However, the Trump administration is still working on it, and the president himself has not yet given final approval to this. They just got out of a meeting, an emergency session, if you will, that bore no fruit. Here's the live map of what's going on over there tonight with the most up-to-date information. And 4 hours ago, U.S. Treasury Secretary, that would be Scott Bessent, in Washington, saying Washington seized $1 billion in Iranian cryptocurrency assets. And Here's video of air defense activity over the Iranian island of Qasem tonight, likely against drones, it says. See if we've got it here. Here we go. Not much to see, but you can hear the fire. Okay, let's go back to the map. And CNN is quoting a U.S. official. Trump will not approve the memorandum of understanding until he is certain that Khamenei has agreed to it. You first. That's what that means. I'm not signing it until he signs it. Oh, I'm not signing it until he signs it. The whole thing is so, I mean, it's so serious, and yet in many levels, this is so juvenile. New York Times reporting Trump's meeting in the Situation Room lasted about 2 hours, and he did not reach a decision on a new agreement with Iran. Fars news agency citing informed Iranian sources the memorandum of understanding stipulates a complete ceasefire in Lebanon. Iran's not budging. I don't think this is happening. Not the way Trump wants us to believe. Not at all. Let's go to the Truth Social scroll and see what the president is saying about this tonight. I didn't know how much weight to give this tonight. Some people think this should be, viewing this as the top story today. But I don't know. I'm not inclined to say that this is the main story tonight, because it seems like status quo, and it's still fitting the pattern where it seems like every Friday for the last, I don't know how many weeks now, Trump comes out with some announcement where some major new development happens on the positive side, saying that peace is at hand, or the blockade's going to end. It's imminent. We've got a deal. We just have to sign it. Here we go again. What's that do to oil prices? Oil prices drop. And then by the time we get to Monday, we're into some sort of a full-blown conflict again in real terms and in the media. And I think what's going on again tonight is that while he's talking about how we've got this imminent peace for the past couple of days, including today, in fact, you've still got the same level of conflict, the attacks going on back and forth. It's all a mind game, and it's just him flapping his gums, and it's affecting the markets, which is pretty sick because lives are at stake. And we've already seen 13 U.S. service members killed, not to mention many more Iranians killed in this conflict. And it's gotten so bad, it's gotten so poorly. There are many analysts who say that Donald Trump has lost this war. A war that he picked, that he did not consult anyone on, did not go looking for any kind of assistance from anyone, not even from within the United States or within his even, Congress, or nothing. No real allies other than Israel. So he's basically out there on a limb on his own. And if it had gone smoothly, I guess he could take credit for it. But with the way things have turned out so far, he's going to be on the hook for a pretty negative outcome. He'll try to spin it, and that's what he's looking for tonight. He's looking for a way to get out of this, save face, a way to be able to declare victory and maybe walk away from it. I don't know. But here's the Truth Social scroll. Not too interested in the first one. Not too interested in that. Shockingly, a judge, oh yes, this is a big story, I think. A judge appointed by Barack Hussein Obama, Christopher Cooper, ruled that the Kennedy Center, which was going to close in early July for large-scale renovations and construction due to years of neglect, decay, and poor maintenance, and which was transformed by the Trump administration into the finest facility of its kind anywhere in the world, is not allowed to close for these renovations, which would not be possible to properly do without such a closure. Additionally, Judge Cooper ruled that the 36-member Board of Trustees, which unanimously voted to add the name Trump onto the former Kennedy Center, making it the Trump Kennedy Center, did not have the right to do such an addition, and the name Trump must be removed. That's right. That was the headline earlier today. They have to take the sign down, the Trump sign. Oh, by the way, it is the Gulf of Mexico, remember? The Kennedy Center has lost over the years, he says, prior to our getting involved a short while ago, hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases, including ridiculous construction jobs that were done over $100 million a year. I took great pride in taking over a losing institution and looked forward to making it into a great and prestigious winner for Washington, D.C., and indeed the United States of America. Unfortunately, Judge Cooper and the radical left would rather see it die, all caps, than have President Trump transform it into something that everyone could be proud of, much as I have done in many cases throughout my life. And recently, with all of the construction renovations and fix-ups that we have completed with the Department of Interior on waterfalls, fountains, monuments, and other things of beauty, and this is a really long post, that we have brought back to life and are now safe and secure, all caps, after record-setting crime, Washington, D.C. is thriving like perhaps never before. It's always extreme statements. It's always the biggest, the best, the most incredible ever, or the worst ever, whatever he's talking about. It's always the best or the absolute worst. Therefore, he goes on, based on the fact that the radical left Democrats, I'm surprised he didn't say Democrats, care more about opposing your favorite president, me, all caps, because it is all about him, than saving a dying performing arts center, almost all of which lose large amounts of money throughout the country. We are going to be working with Congress to transfer this failing institution back to them so they can make a determination as to what to do with it. Judge Cooper was given a present. Oh my God, it just goes on and on and on. I'm not going to finish it. He's upset. This is what it comes down to. He's not happy tonight because the court said he can't do all that. He can't just rename the place after himself, after all. We'll see what happens now, because there's lawfare on both sides, and he'll push back. He's got a lot of power, even though he's getting into the second half of his second term. So every day his power wanes a little bit more, as is the case with every president, especially in the second term of their presidency, if they get one. What else does he have here? Let me go back to his page specifically. Oh, yeah, the Trump RX.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be
Trump
here
prescriptions
on this very beautiful day. A lot of very positive things happening. Less than 4 months ago, I stood before you to announce the launch of the TrumpRx.gov, a brand new website featuring the largest discounts on prescription drugs in the history of our country, the history, frankly, of any country. And for decades, Americans paid the highest drug prices anywhere in the world.
See what I mean? Like everything, I'm actually tired of it because it's ridiculous. Everything is an extreme statement. It's always the biggest, the best, the worst, the most. Anywhere in the world, any time in history, in all of mankind, ever since, the human beings stood up on two legs. It's ridiculous, actually, because you can't trust anything. There's no true perspective on it. It's always the biggest and the best and blah, blah, blah.
Far. But under the most favored nation agreements I negotiated, we now pay the lowest price paid for anybody in any country. We went from the highest to the lowest, and I think outside of maybe a cure itself, it's the biggest thing to happen to healthcare and everything having to do with medical in any way, shape, or form. There's never been anything like this. We think of it, we went from the most expensive to the least expensive. So we've slashed the price of dozens of commonly used prescription drugs by differences of 400, 500, and even 600%
You slash the prices by 400%? Think about that for a minute. How do you slash a price by 400%? If you slash the price by 100%, then it would be free, right? 100% of the cost, gone. It's free. How do you slash the price by 400%? I have to look this up. This is crazy talk. He's said this multiple times. It doesn't make sense. There must be some sense to it, or he wouldn't say it, would he? Let me just ask artificial intelligence. Let's go and ask Grok. How about that? Maybe Grok will know. It just seems like it's just, how do you do that? Yeah, it's like in the hockey game, and everything was going pretty good there. We got 3 goals scored against us, though. We were all out there giving her 110%. Giving her 110%. Now, I can see how you can have a 400% increase, but how do you have a 400% decrease? I don't know. Let's ask Grok. Because 100% takes it to free. Unless you're paying people to take the drugs. How can Donald Trump claim that under Trump RX, drug prices have declined by 400%, 500% or more? How is that even possible if 100% reduction would make the drugs free? I need the explanation because I don't understand. Okay, maybe it's a misuse or exaggeration of percentage language. It's mathematically impossible for prices to decline by more than 100% in the normal sense. That's right. It doesn't make any sense. The math problem. It is a problem, isn't it? A 100% reduction in price takes it from, say, $100 to zero, free. A 400% reduction would imply going to negative $300. The seller pays you $300 to take the drug. Same for 500% or 600%. This isn't how percentages for decreases work. If something drops from $500 to $100, that's an 80% reduction. And people just let this stuff wash over them, I guess because people don't know math or they don't want to think about it. Math is hard, says Barbie. Trump has repeatedly made claims like this. Drugs down 400, 500, 600%, or even up to 1,500% in some speeches, it says. It's true. I've heard him say it when promoting his most favored nation pricing efforts. It's just stupid. It is stupid. Okay, I'm not even going to give this any more time. I'm tired of it. I can't take it anymore. The stupidity. You know what? That's probably why he's popular, because this is what makes him such an effective orator or speech giver, right? He speaks in the tongue of the common person. Exaggeration, working class kind of, like my class of people, where he speaks like a common language. It's not academic in any way. It's not highbrow. It's just it's like if you go down to the local pub and you're listening to some guy who's had three too many beer, and he's like, blah, blah, blah. He's slurring his words and speaking in very plain language and getting a few things wrong and exaggerating the hell out of everything. I love you, man. Like, I love you more than life itself. That's why, if you want to effectively communicate with the public, you kind of have to keep the language simple, because this is something that I learned a long time ago in how to write news for broadcast. You don't know how intelligent, somebody might be out there. So you kind of shoot for simple language and simple writing so that you can communicate effectively with people in layman terms, not in academic, like highbrow university level language. Otherwise, you kind of miss the target for a lot of people, especially they may be intelligent in this area, but they might not be able to understand that subject. So you keep the language kind of at a lower level. A grade 6 reading level is generally where news for broadcast is written. It's targeted at that level because a lot of people just, they don't use language skills as robustly and as regularly as, say, somebody who writes for a living. They're welders or pipe fitters, or, they specialize in their areas. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And also the education system in a lot of cases lets people down too. So you have to keep the language common. But if you want to reach the masses, if you create a commercial, a beer commercial, now you might inject some sex into the ad because, they say sex sells. But I think even more effectively what you do, and I know that this is done, they put people in advertisements that resemble or represent the exact customer that they are trying to reach, unless it's a sex ad, a sex appeal based ad. That's a different animal. But if you're going to show people, if you're selling, I don't know, baby strollers, then you would put a woman or a man of, an age, and maybe their 20s or whatever, when they would be at the age where they're going to be having kids and a family. You don't put like a 90-year-old guy in there unless it's a grandmother. You know what I'm saying? Okay. And if you want to sell a lot of beer, then I guess you get some guy wearing a big Trump hat and a great big beer belly on him, sitting out there flipping burgers on a barbecue, sipping on a Coors Light, try and lose some weight. The more Coors Light you drink, the more the pounds come off, because what was the tastes great, less filling? Was that Coors Light or Miller Light? I can't remember. I don't drink beers, so I'm not a beer aficionado, but I remember the ad. I just don't remember which brand it was. Tastes great, less filling. Tastes great, less filling. Well, we'll fill you up with more news when we come back.
Someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching. The world is watching. On TV, the entire world is watching. On social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching.
We are back, and another loss for Trump tonight. He dropped that lawsuit because of the leak, his leaked tax returns that showed he only paid a few $100s in tax the 1 year, which was a violation of the law. But anyway, he dropped the lawsuit, sued the government for $10 billion, basically sued himself because he is the government now. So he sued his own administration for $10 billion. And And then it probably would have been thrown out, but he made a deal with the people he appointed. And they got them to set up. He got them to set up a $1.776 billion, effectively a slush fund, a legal defense fund, sort of on the other side of the lawfare war. Money that was being directed somehow, you're not allowed to know under this deal who actually administers this $1.776 billion fund, or how it's being distributed, or even who's getting the money. But we know that there were some J6 defendants and a bunch of Trump allies, people that had been, facing serious legal challenges, and this money, a lot of those folks were lining up for it to take a piece of that. 1.776 billion. It seems just a little bit. Again, just the amount of money, 1776. It's just too much. It's beyond absurd. It's taxpayer dollars that Trump is using to defend people who many of them had been previously convicted, and they're going to go back. And I don't know, man. It's just, it smacks of corruption. In any event, because it smacks of corruption, you're seeing this come back here tonight, because the J6 prosecutor launched his own little legal challenge, and a judge today has halted the distribution or the administration of the money being allocated. J6 prosecutor Andrew Floyd and other targets of the Trump administration had sued to block what critics had described as a slush fund for Trump allies. Federal judge temporarily blocked. This is NBC. The Trump administration's 1.8 or $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund. Media, I don't think, wants to use that 1.776 billion. It makes it seem very patriotic, doesn't it? So they're downplaying that. So this is the war of words that goes on. But a federal judge halting this whole thing, created as part of an unprecedented settlement with the president, his family, and the Trump organization. This coming from U.S. District Judge Leonie M. Brinkema of the Eastern District of Virginia entered the order today after a January 6th prosecutor and others sued to block the fund last week. The fund being operated out of the Justice Department. Both Democrats and Republicans have criticized the fund. Opponents labeling it a massive slush fund for Trump's allies. Its existence has alarmed some legal experts, in part because there will be very little public oversight over how it is managed. And Senate Republican leaders last week punted a vote on a GOP package to fund ICE and the Border Patrol until June, in part because of concerns over the fund. Battle's not over there, I'm sure. That's a whole lot of money, man. A lot of cash. Speaking of ICE, tonight, an ICE agent accused of shooting a man in North Minneapolis in the leg and then lying about it has been arrested in Texas. Here we go. I think we have, do we have a photo of him? Maybe not. But I think we do have this. There he is. There's this picture of the Christian Castro, 52 years old. So the charges were laid previously. There's a picture of him. But he has now been arrested in Texas by Texas Rangers. This is actually a fairly significant story, because while it may seem somewhat isolated and maybe of not a lot of consequence because the man shot was shot in the leg. This is not a fatal shooting. It does highlight ongoing tension between state-level law enforcement, local law enforcement, against federal ICE authorities. Because at the federal level, coming from the Trump administration and ICE, they're saying that the charges against this ICE officer are politically motivated. Here's post this from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. Christian Castro, ICE agent charged in Metro surge shooting, arrested in Texas. Castro is the second federal agent, excuse me, to be criminally charged for conduct during Operation Metro Surge. Christian Castro is one of two agents ICE Director Todd Lyons acknowledged lied about the circumstances of the incident. We did mention it when it happened here on Maverick News, now taking on a new flavor. Christian Castro, this news release continues, an Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE agent was arrested in Texas this morning. Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, BCA investigators located Mr. Castro and traveled to Texas this week. He was arrested by Texas Rangers with the BCA investigators and Department of Homeland Security Office of the Inspector General staff present at the scene. Mr. Castro was charged earlier this month with 4 counts of second-degree assault and 1 count of falsely reporting a crime for an incident on January 14th, 2026, when he discharged his weapon through the front door of a home, knowing there were people who had just run inside. The bullet traveled through the door and struck one victim in the leg before making its final impact in the wall of a child's room. Today's arrest is a critical step forward in our prosecution of Mr. Castro. Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty said the BCA's investigative work was instrumental in this process, and we're grateful for their collaboration as we pursue accountability for this incident on behalf of Mr. Sosa Celis, his family, and our community. That would be, I believe, the guy who was shot in the leg. Luckily, nobody was killed. Luckily, whatever child that room belonged to wasn't injured or killed. And so again, it highlights the tension, the conflict, that's a war between the Trump administration and the ICE operation. And they've gone to war with even the authorities in some states and even local law enforcement. So you've got law enforcement fighting law enforcement, arguing back and forth, different, federal versus state versus local, and they're all fighting in court. And even, I think maybe to some degree, there's a danger that you're going to see it in the streets eventually if this isn't dialed back. But as I said the other night, there's a lot of stuff you're not seeing now, because when this whole ICE operation began, they were putting it out there in front, making a show out of it, like a reality social media program, like a reality TV show, but it was ICE. It was like a show for social media, because Trump wanted to show his base of support that he was taking action on deportations, an issue, a hot button issue that generates support for him among a certain core group of people within the MAGA movement who get jacked right up over that issue. So he was putting that stuff out there front and center, but it ended up being very divisive, a lot of blowback from his critics, certainly from the Democrat side. And as a result, you saw escalating violence, escalating tension, even people, U.S. citizens being shot in the street and people being killed, because it was all getting out of hand. It was way out of hand. It continues to be out of hand. But a lot of this stuff now you're not hearing about, we're not seeing, because, well, there are continuing reports and incidents, verified incidents of conflict and injuries and similar kinds of problems. They're ongoing, but they're not being highlighted on mainstream media, through independent media, on social media. We're not hearing about it, because now they want to dial it back, take it out of the spotlight, because it was making ICE look bad. It was showing what was going on, and it was being amplified because you were getting all these protests, which were also jacked up and escalated and amplified because the people on the anti-ICE side knew the cameras would be there, so they played to the cameras too. So the presence of the cameras, the fact that they were making a show out of it, makes it all blow up that much more. It amplifies it all. And then it does, I think, I know that it affects our perception and the level of concern that we should have about anything, because on social media, we're focused on that very thing in that very place, that one incident, but you're not seeing what's going on in the rest of the community or the country. Your attention is focused on very specific things. If a tree falls in the forest and that's all you take a picture of or shoot video of live and you broadcast that to the world, everybody becomes aware of that one tree falling down, don't they? That's my point. But if you don't broadcast it and the tree falls down, does it even make a noise? Stay with me.
The information war is raging. Truth without integrity is worth nothing. Maverick News. Because those who have power and those who seek it must be held accountable.
The world is watching.
Join our family of truth seekers. Donate today and add your voice to the chorus of Maverick Knights. Donate at maverickdonations.com. Truth. Integrity. It's the Maverick way. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
All right, let's look at what's going on on the Canadian front here tonight, because we have had a lot of people marching in the streets out in Alberta, where the separatist movement is facing off against the pro-Canada movement. And today there were big protests or rallies, however you want to characterize it. And there were a lot of statements made, especially on the separatist side, that are misleading, not entirely honest. Not sure if I would even use the word truthful. Still looking for my clips here. Hope we didn't lose them. Here's one. Okay. Yeah, so we've got a whole bunch of people out there, and I have been kind of taking a look through the day to see what's going on. So we had two competing rallies or protests, okay? Now the separatist movement, and the other one, a pro-Canada rally, largely on this day organized by labor unions. Here's some of what we saw on the streets. Canadian flags, union flags there. And commercial workers union represented there. Other unions involved as well, which are getting a lot of input there. This is just a labor thing and a pro-Canada thing. Now the reports that I've seen say that the pro-Canada side, that their crowds were like 10 times bigger. That's what was being reported as a result here tonight. Now here's another shot of the pro-Canada parade or protest. Walking down the streets of Edmonton. Got it pixelated because I think this came straight off a live stream, but not the best connection. And so I did speak to a couple of people out there today who also indicated that the pro-Canada side was substantially larger, at least on this day. We'll see what happens. In the days, weeks, months ahead, because we have, 5 months of ongoing conflict now, because the Premier of Alberta has made this unilateral decision to proceed with a referendum on whether there should be a referendum, which I don't think will in the end provide any level of clarity. 37-word question that isn't clear to begin with. And I don't see any way that this is going to put this to bed. It's going to extend things. And if you want to know why you can't get a pipeline built, it's because there's instability, uncertainty, and who the heck is going to invest in a province where you don't even know if the province is going to be part of Canada or not part of Canada. As a result of this and a recent debate between separatist lawyer Keith Wilson and former Premier Jason Kenney, Conservative, there's now this ongoing furor online, social media pushback response because of Kenney in the debate saying Albertans should be concerned about losing their Canadian passports and citizenship, certainly their passports, if Alberta declares its independence. Well, as a result of that, separatists, a lot of them have lost their minds, and they've been out there posting like crazy saying, oh no, it's not true. If we separate and become independent, you get to keep your Canadian citizenship. You get to keep your passport. And on the surface, that appears to be true, because if you're born in Canada, you're automatically a Canadian citizen. However, it's not really truthful. It's not really honest. And indeed, you could lose, and I think likely would lose, your Canadian citizenship. Here's Jason Kenney's response on social media saying, clown show. One nutty separatist leader, Jeffrey Rath, lawyer, says that I'm a Canadian patriot because I want to draft young Albertans to die in the Ukraine war. Another nutty separatist, leader Sylvester, says his Republic of Alberta would actually impose a military draft on young Albertans to fight in what war is a question. And then he says Albertans thinking of voting for separation to send a message or get a new deal this is the kind of wackiness you would be enabling. Here's what the lawyer Jeff Rath posts. He says, hey, Jason Kenney, our little warmonger, do you support young Albertans being drafted to die in the Ukraine war you like so much? I don't think that we're being drafted, are we? I didn't know that there was a draft. I'm pretty sure there's not. And then here, this is about Mitch Sylvester. This is, I think, actually important and enlightening. Why? Because they really don't tell you what you are going to get if you vote for independence, separation. They are just highlighting mostly grievances that they say they have. But here says in this, I think this is a story from the Star from sometime a little while ago. He says, Mitch Sylvester, separatist leader, the guy behind the petition, he says, he told audiences when I saw him in the newly independent country, Albertans would be allowed to keep their Canadian passports, that all Albertans would get a 40% tax cut on day one, and that Albertans would not only keep their Canadian pensions in an independent Alberta, but that the new government would double them. Do you really believe this? I've got some swampland in the Arctic to sell you. He goes on, quote, you know what the goal would be, he told one audience in late February, quote, to go back to where it was when I was a young man, when a guy could be an electrician, have 2 or 3 kids, afford a house, and his wife would stay home and raise the kids. That same night, Sylvester suggested that an independent Alberta would have mandatory military service. Do I hear people talking about that? No, not so much. It's not that he's hidden it, but that's what he has been highlighting. That's what he said. Sylvester went on and said, he added that only those born in Alberta would ever be entitled to Alberta citizenship. So we're going to have to get those girls making more babies, he said. Yeah, well, I'm all for, people having families, and I know that we have concerns out there that people are not having enough kids, so I get that. But I think what we're getting at here is keep those women barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. It goes on, it says, but the reality is that none of that is certain. That's right. And many experts believe most of it is deeply improbable. Quote, these are policy choices that a future government would have to make, said Trevor Tome, an economist and public policy expert at the University of Calgary, who says, and there's no way to know that separation would lead to a particular kind of government. That's what I've been saying too. They're not telling you what they're going to give you. They're just getting you angry, getting you pissed off. That's their game plan. It goes on here and says, that's even assuming that separation itself is possible. Dion, for his part, doesn't think it's remotely probable that a 50% plus 1 vote would lead to separation. 50% plus 1 is a judicial recount, he said. Would you break up a country on a judicial recount? It's absurd. Also, very true. That's truthful. You see, if you have a vote and you have 50% plus 1 person, then that could be like, if you only have 100 people out of the whole province show up to vote, then you would have 100 people making the decision because they voted. And then you would only need 51 people to vote for separation. And 51 people, therefore, would dictate not only to Alberta, but also to the rest of the country just because they showed up to vote. But that's why the legislation, the rules, the Constitution, the whole enchilada is set up in such a way that separating does not happen instantly just because you have a referendum and you try to trigger things with a 50% plus 1 vote. For actual clarity, It needs to meet a much higher bar than that for a lot of other reasons as well. Not just because of the analysis based on voter turnout, but because of what happens with other provinces, the way that it impacts the entire country. And while the separatists are out there saying, oh, all you other people, you know, they want to take your voice away. All you other Canadians, us other Canadians. I keep hearing them say, you all have to stay out of this. This is our affair. This is our business. They don't want you saying anything. They don't want your input. They don't want to hear from you. They get to decide what goes on out there, even though it affects all of Canada, not just Alberta. I say horse hockey. That's not true. We all have a stake in what goes on out there, just as if Ontario decided to leave or separate from Canada, it would have an impact on the rest of the entire country. So everybody should have a say at some point in what goes on. If you want true democracy affecting the entire country, but they don't care. They're telling people you're just not going to have to pay taxes. And this assertion that you get to keep your Canadian citizenship and passport, that's not being really honest. And this idea that you get to keep your pension plan and that you get, basically they're telling everybody out there that if you vote for separation, you get to separate and be free and clear. You don't have to pay any more taxes, no more federal taxes, no more federal rules, no more federal engagement, but you get to keep all the benefits of being a Canadian. You get all the benefits of being a Canadian without having to pay any taxes or contribute to the country in any way. You get to keep everything for yourself and not have to contribute in any way. Does that sound even remotely realistic? If Alberta votes to separate, that triggers a duty for the federal government to enter into negotiations. That's the way the rules are written. And as part of that, if Alberta were to be successful, these separatists, if they were to be successful in breaking up the country and breaking away and becoming an independent sovereign nation, then all these issues, all those issues, whether you get to keep your citizenship, your pension, all these federal assets that the federal government has invested in over the years, all of these things would have to be negotiated. So it's not clear what would actually end up happening. Do you get to keep your passport out there? Do you remain a Canadian citizen? Well, they point and say, well, look, we've had dual citizenship since the 1970s. And all those people get to be dual citizens. Yeah, well, maybe not. As soon as if this triggers negotiations on this front, Alberta independence requires a change to the Constitution. As a result, this opens up the whole Constitution. Many sections of the Constitution likely to be rewritten, revised, laws, rules surrounding all of this, government policies surrounding all of this would get new scrutiny, new deals all the way around. It would affect everything. And do you think for 1 minute that the rest of Canada would say, that's okay, all you Albertans. You don't have to contribute anymore. You don't have to pay any taxes. You don't have to contribute in any way. But we'll continue to send you benefits. We'll continue to let you participate in the Canada pension plan. We'll let you keep your passport. You can be a citizen. You get all the benefits of being a Canadian without having to contribute. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. Highly unlikely. And when the federal government, if the federal government, if ever gets to that point, the federal government would have a duty to represent actual Canadians at that point, not separated Albertans. They would be negotiating on behalf of Canada and Canadians. not just showing, goodwill necessarily toward Alberta and the separatists who have broken up the country. I think quite the opposite. They would go in, play hardball, and negotiate a deal that would actually end up being detrimental to the entire separatist movement. This is a picture of the guy behind the petition. I believe this is, a lot of people have thrown a lot of insults at this man because emotions are so high. I'm hearing all kinds of things like egghead, conehead. Some people say he looks a little bit like a emaciated Lex Luthor. But, not my style to throw insults like that around myself. I'm just telling you what other people are saying. Anyway, this disruptive process, it's creating a situation where these separatists are just not being really honest with people. Oh, you get to keep everything, but you don't have to contribute anymore. No more taxes for us. But we all get to be Canadians without being Canadians. It's not going to happen. And Jason Kenney was quite right to highlight that. And as this post here shows tonight too, I think you better be careful about what you actually do out there, Alberta. Like, we love Alberta. I love Alberta. I've been to Alberta a bunch of times. It's a great place. I mean, lots of great people out there. But these separatists, these people leading the charge, they're not being truthful with people. They're not being honest. Going to be landlocked. You're never going to get a pipeline jammed through without paying a hefty price. You might not pay taxes, but you'll pay taxes. You'll pay in a different way. If you want to go across BC or across other parts of Canada, to get anything into the province or out of the province, you'll need permission from either the United States or all the other provinces in Canada. You want to bring something in? You want to bring in widgets from China? It's got to come through BC and then into Alberta. It's like the trucks are going to transit across and you're going to pay fees for that. You want to get oil to the coast, you're going to pay a fee. And I don't know if you'll even get it built at that point, because Pierre Poilievre was right about one thing, has been right about one thing. Ultimately, because of the way the Constitution is written, the Prime Minister does have the power in the end, after going through the process of consulting with First Nations, after going through the process, if necessary, the Prime Minister does have the power. The federal government has the power to just make a final decision and make a pipeline happen. They can just authorize it on a federal level and impose it on any province, a national infrastructure project like a pipeline. That is true. If you read this Constitution, which is very real for our very real country, and they do have the power. The reason they don't is because that can spark legal challenges, which can actually end up slowing the process down over time. So the faster way, the fairer way, the Canadian way is to engage and involve all of the stakeholders, which is businesses that invest, citizens, Canadian through the Canadian government, provinces, First Nations. Cooperative federalism, that's the approach. If you proceed that way, you avoid triggering legal challenges, legal responses. So that's the proper way to do it. And if it's handled properly, these things can be expedited. That's what Wab Kinew, Premier of Manitoba, highlighted during the Premier's conference this past week, saying, let's put this thing on pause for a while and see if these pipelines actually get built. Let's give Mark Carney a chance to prove Pierre Poilievre wrong, who's saying that everything the government is doing is an illusion. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But there does seem to be some substance to this finally. The Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith herself, saying, hey, we have this MOU. we're making progress. We're working on it. She says she's going to be campaigning on the stay in Canada side. I don't know how, how genuine or sincere she is about her efforts or about her desire to keep the country together. I kind of question her motives and her desires and all of that, but especially because she's the one who actually has enabled this when she could have snuffed it out, put out these flames. Because of the way the petitions are handled, which were not constitutional, but the lies just ramp up, and Danielle Smith herself has been lying because she knows, I know, everybody knows, even though she's lied about it, saying they have over 700,000 people who wanted a referendum. No, they had 300,000 people on the separatist side saying that they had, that the separatist side saying they had 300,000 signatures, which may or may not be valid. They have not been verified because the process was handled in a potentially illegal way. So a court quashed it, and they were using an illegally obtained electors list. So they could have actually been forging the signatures. And yes, it is different than even a political party using that list during an election to send messages out to the citizens in a targeted way. Because at the end of the day, during an election, you're not signing a petition. You're actually going to a polling station and casting a ballot under supervision to make sure that the vote is conducted properly, fairly, and democratically, and without, hopefully, any kind of shenanigans going on. But with the petition, people aren't going to a polling station, and there's been no scrutiny, beyond people kind of seeing sort of what's going on. But these were not secure private voting polling stations run by Elections Alberta. The petitions were just handled by hundreds of different people in unsecured ways, put into cardboard boxes. And yeah, because they've had access to the list with people's names, their electors, information, voter IDs, all of this digital personal information, they could easily have forged a great many of them, maybe even half of them or more. Who knows? Point is, they haven't been verified. And on the other side, the people were really signing that other petition because they didn't want a referendum, not because they want one. That much is very clear. And not only that, there was a box checked there when they filed that paperwork, when they filed those petitions. There was a box check. Do you want a referendum or do you want legislative review? It was clearly checked. They wanted legislative review. They wanted it handled in the legislature by the MLAs. They did not want a referendum, even though the wording in the petition itself does say they want a referendum. When they filed it, they checked the box for legislative review, not for a referendum. And the people clearly signing that obviously have been opposed to a referendum taking place. So it's not honest or truthful again, even for the premier to make this statement saying that 700,000 people collectively, both from the pro-Canada and the separatist side, want a referendum. It's just not so. But the dishonesty will continue because we have 5 more months of this crap going on. I'll put it to you too. I'm just kind of at the point where, I'm frustrated. A lot of people are frustrated. And I know that there's some people out there who are accusing people like this guy of being a whiner, a complainer. And BC Premier David Eby saying that Mark Carney is rewarding bad behavior. So you're getting, other premiers, including Wab Kinew and others, they're frustrated. They're tired of this. Because people don't want to get Albertans upset. We do love Alberta just as we love people from Quebec. But the separatists, the people at the core of the center of this thing, they are using misdirection, dishonesty, disingenuous statements, amplified, exaggerated grievances to get people angry, respond in an emotional way. They're dividing their groups up so that when they do something illegal or controversial, the whole separatist movement can't be taken down. They're all in pods. You can see the strategy that they're using, giving even the premier, I think, some level of plausible deniability when it comes to, why she's doing what she's doing. And you see like this lawyer, Jeffrey Rath, separatist lawyer, attacking everybody. I put it to you that I don't think Jeffrey Rath is nearly as upset with the premier or with Pierre Poilievre as he's suggesting he is, even in this post tonight on X. He's accusing Danielle Smith, the premier now, of being in Mark Carney's back pocket, saying that, he's admitting now that it's never been about the pipeline. The other day, I highlighted what he said about that. He says, we don't even need this pipeline to the West Coast. Danielle Smith didn't call an actual referendum because she is beholden now. She's in Mark Carney's camp. She's working with Carney, which is not true. But I think the reason he's coming out with this kind of rhetoric is because it's all performative. It's like fake fighting to kind of keep it in the news, to keep people engaged, and to ramp up the emotional aspects of this, to get people angry, especially on the separatist side. Oh my God, now Danielle Smith is pro-Carney. She's turned full liberal. Hardly. But in any event, here he is posting about what Poilievre said tonight, or earlier today, about how he's going to be going across Alberta campaigning for Canada. Jeff Rath, separatist lawyer, saying, what a dumb answer. Does any real Albertan want a Canadian to wrap their arms around us? Seems like an invitation to let the larcenous Laurentians further pick our pockets. So you see, it's okay for him and the separatist leaders, the separatist elites out there, it's okay for them to attack Canada, to attack other Canadians, to tell the rest of Canada to shut your mouth. You don't get a voice. You're not supposed to weigh in on this. We're all supposed to shut up because it's just getting too emotional out here in Alberta. No, we have a stake and we have every right to speak up from other parts of Canada, and so we should. Pierre Poilievre as well, he has a voice. Rath is against him because Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, even though he's from Alberta and is currently resides or holds his seat in an Alberta riding, he says he's going to campaign to keep Canada united. He's pro-Canada. That's his message. That's what he says he's going to campaign on, with a message of positivity, and I can get behind that.
Hi, Mr. Poilievre. Mr. Poilievre, Rahim Ahmed from the National Post.
I'm editorializing.
Mr. Poilievre, you said that you'll be campaigning across Alberta for a united Canada. Can you give us an update on any visits that you have scheduled back home in the next few weeks? And are you open to debating folks like Keith Wilson and some of the other prominent Alberta separatists?
We will be back in my home province of Alberta to campaign for a united country. And our message is that all of Canada needs to wrap its arms around Alberta. Let's ensure that every Albertan knows that Canada loves Alberta, that Canada is Alberta, Alberta is Canada. We need to have a strong, united nation right across this country. And that will mean a stronger province of Alberta, but getting out of the way and off the backs of our energy sector, getting rid of the gun grab, locking up criminals to bring safety to our streets, allowing young Albertans to start families with affordable homes, decentralizing control in the country so that Albertans have more direct decision-making power within their provincial boundaries. That is a positive optimistic, unifying vision that I will be presenting to all Albertans in all corners of the province.
See, and again, editorializing here, but I think that's fair. He is criticizing policies coming, from the Liberal government. He wants to form a conservative government, but he still wants to keep Canada together. He's going to campaign pro-Canada. Cool, fine, whatever. Today, though, he commented on the latest economic data that came out, suggesting Canada is in an actual recession. And that sparked a little bit of controversy. It's actually kind of a meh story that he's amplifying for his own political purposes, which is, again, fair. Technically, yes, Canada is kind of in recessionary territory because we've had 2 consecutive quarters of net negative GDP growth. So last quarter, Q4, final quarter of 2025, real GDP contracted 1%. And now in this second quarter, in the bunching, in the grouping, Q1 of this year contracted again by 0.1% over the year, annualized. So it's if it had been like a point higher, like 0.1% higher to take it to zero, it technically wouldn't be a recession. But because you're into a recession technically by 0.1% of GDP negative growth. In a way, that's bad. That isn't bad. It is bad because we need more growth. But it's, on the other hand, you can argue that it's actually pretty good given that we're under so much negative economic pressure from the United States because of this tariff war we are facing right now, not to mention the negative economic impact this separatist movement is having on Canada and especially Alberta right now. It will be very difficult to get any companies to invest in anything in Alberta as long as this separatist movement continues. This is why so much of what's coming out of the mouths of these separatist elites, who are not suffering at all, trust me, they claim to be victims of this and claim to be victims of that, and they're so hard done by. No, they are the separatist elites. They are tied in with political movements, and you see them hobnobbing and rubbing elbows with some of the most powerful politicians in the world, if not the world, the most powerful. They've been down to Mar-a-Lago. They've been down to hobnob with the Trump administration. They're meeting with some of the richest people on the planet. They have a lot of powerful, very rich people in their camp. There's oil money, there's mining money, there's political money, tons of it behind what they are doing. Make no mistake. This separatist movement in Alberta is being spearheaded by people who have a lot of power behind them. The question is, who's really going to end up running the show at the end of all this? The Albertans are not really being told what they might get or what they are going to get on the other side if they vote for separation. Don't know. They like it that way. That's why they've also set this up so they don't have a clear leader like this guy. Is he going to be the next premier? I think there's some talk of that. Or the next prime minister, president. You don't even know what you're going to get. They've talked about it to some degree, but there are no guarantees. You really don't know what kind of a government you're going to get on the other side. It seems to me if you want to sign a contract with someone to destroy what you have, you might want to figure out what you're going to get before you set it all on fire. Before you burn your house down, you might want to know what kind of new house you're going to get, if anything, on the other side. Just the ongoing grievances. It's disingenuous. I'm gonna pull up a clip that I saw here with the separatist lawyer Keith Wilson. Saw it earlier today. Who was he with? He was with this streamer. Streamer's name. Oh, yes, I know. Here we go. Here's the clip. Okay. Wah, 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 wah. Wine, wine, wine. I don't know why Jason Kenney's the guy who's debating Keith Wilson. I don't think Kenney's the right guy. But here's this clip. I'm going to comment.
So one of the concerns and issues that I have with independence, both in Quebec and Alberta, is that I view both provinces as part of my country and my inheritance as a Canadian, just the same way as I view Ontario being your inheritance as a Canadian. And the idea that anyone who's eligible to vote in Canada who moves into Alberta 2 weeks before a independence referendum would be able to have a say on a major impact to my country that I wouldn't have. And so I feel like this would be a major alteration, a permanent change to the makeup of my country. So what is your response to people who see this that way? Not just that there is a distinct entity of people known as Albertans that get a say on Alberta or Quebec, but that this is a major change to Canada that only one group of Canadians get a say on.
Well, welcome to our world. That's the life of Albertan. We don't get a say in the policies that are imposed on us from Ottawa. We don't get a say on the catch and release bail provisions that are imposed on us from Ottawa and make our streets less safe. We don't get a say in the taxes and the reckless spending. We don't get a say on whether or not a spaceport is built on a gravel pad for $200 million. We don't get a say in any of that. Welcome to our world. That's what we're frustrated with. We're treated as a colony.
They don't get a say. I'm so tired of hearing that. I'm editorializing. My opinion. Crybaby. They get a say. Do you think that they're just frustrated because they don't get what they want all the time? The federal government, Canada, has given Alberta a lot. Yeah, we get a lot because they have so much wealth in their oil right now, but they've been through bust cycles as well. They went through the Dust Bowl of the 30s. Canada bailed out the farmers at that time out in Alberta. Things go up, things go down. And yes, they do get a say. They all get to vote just like the rest of us. They only have 5 million people out there, though. So as a result, you have fewer ridings. And yes, there's a heavier concentration of ridings out in Quebec and in Ontario. You have much larger, much more population. More than that. More than 5 million. They only have 5 million people in all of Alberta. With that being said, they do get a say. And if you have, they feel like they are not represented because you listen to people like Keith Wilson who say that they don't have a voice. They clearly do. If there's anytime there's an election, if you have the election can be decided or announced because you have these time zones. And so as the the polls close at different times across the country, it creates a perception where people in Alberta or BC don't get a say, because the election can be decided or determined based on the election results that come in earlier. In the East, the election can be decided. You know what the results are because so many polls report much earlier than they do out West. So they're not all counted at exactly the same time. It happens progressively across the country based on the time zones. And so if you already know that you've got enough seats to form a majority government, or even minority, I guess, depending on how the seats are distributed. So you often see what the result of the election is going to be before the votes are finished being counted in Western Canada. But it doesn't mean they don't get a say. And if you have an extremely tight election, especially with a minority government situation, then what happens in Alberta becomes very important. And their voice counts as well. Not only that, you're telling me that these people, these separatists, don't have a voice? What are we talking about right now? We're talking about Alberta. That's all we've been talking about for how many years has this gone on? Albertans right now, and for quite a while, have had, I would say, a disproportionately large voice in the Canadian political ecosystem. What they're saying resonates across the country. The Premier of Alberta, her grievances dominating the headlines, separatism dominating the headlines. And it's not just the separatism issue, it's the pipeline. The entire country has a lot at stake because of the pipeline, oil, how much wealth is going to come out of the ground. What are we going to do as a country? Everybody's affected by all of it. And Alberta is a vital part of Canada, just as Ontario is, just as Quebec is, just as every part of Canada is, just as the Arctic is, because we need security. We need to secure the passage through the Arctic, because that's becoming a vital shipping route. Every part of Canada is vital to one degree or another. You can quantify it any way you want, but every Canadian everywhere has a voice. People in the Arctic have a voice. People in Quebec have a voice. In the Maritimes, everywhere. Everybody feels like they don't have a voice because we're all just individuals, but we all get a vote. We're all important. And out in Alberta right now, they're getting all the attention. And why? Because you've got people whining and kicking and screaming. But here's the other thing about Alberta. The province of Alberta would not even exist if not for Canada. Canada created Alberta after Confederation. It didn't exist as a province until Canada decided to create it, because we had people moving out west to settle the land. Canada created the boundary lines, and they could have created one bigger province, but they created two separate ones, made Alberta its own province. Go look up the history. You wouldn't even exist. It's not like Quebec and Ontario, which were, here before Confederation, Upper and Lower Canada, competing sort of interests, the French and the English, right? Out west, different kind of history, a little bit different, and it didn't even exist until Canada created. And then, because people had these very same kinds of grievances, Canada granted provincial sovereignty under our system of government to Alberta because they wanted it. And it was controversial at the time, but the federal government back in the day said, yes, you should have the same level of autonomy and sovereignty as a subnational entity as the rest of the country. And then later they actually did go further, and they even granted the jurisdiction over resources, including oil and precious minerals and forestry and all of those natural resources to the province of Alberta, as is the case with other provinces. So they got full provincial status because Canada gave it to you. Now these guys want to take it away from Canada. They're like, Alberta is a child of Canada. But right now, I'm telling you that these separatist elites, and I'm not talking about the people of Alberta, the people of Alberta, a lot of them are being misled, they're being misguided, they're being duped into thinking they're going to get away with paying no taxes. All they got to do is follow the separatist elites who are throwing an ongoing, ridiculous, childish temper tantrum, kicking and screaming and whining. We're a victim. We don't get a voice. Our votes don't count. Who the hell thinks your vote actually counts? I guess it doesn't matter. It's just one vote. I'm not going to bother. The future favors those who show up, right? Or bends to the will of those who show up, I think is the saying. Well, everybody gets a voice. Everybody gets a vote. Nobody feels like they're represented because we're just one person voting, but it matters. Because at the end of the day, all the votes get counted. And at the end of the day, it changes come. And even in our system of government, even if you don't form government, you still get a voice in Parliament. So all of the MPs that get elected out in those Alberta ridings, they still get to go to Ottawa. They still get a voice in Parliament, even if it's in opposition. And that is also a vital part of our political process. Criticizing the government, holding the government to account. And in a minority government situation, you might not form government, but you can hold the balance of power. That was the case with the last Trudeau-Singh government, wasn't it? Because the NDP pulled the government, the Liberal government under Trudeau, further and further to the left, the furthest left our government has ever been. It wasn't just because of the Liberals. It was because the NDP pulled them that way under Justin Singh, then leader of the New Democratic Party. And he got a lot of things jammed through, pushed through government as the third party, the smallest party, with only a handful of MPs sitting in Parliament, but they were the tail wagging the dog of the then Trudeau Liberal government. So yes, you do have a voice, even if you're in a minority situation. That's actually one of the strengths of the Canadian system, the parliamentary system, because everybody is actually in government, even if you don't form the government. They're all part of the government, every sitting MP. They all get to vote on these issues. That's also why I say, let the floor crossing happen. It's always happened. It's part of our system. And that's because every MP, even if they are part of a party, they still have the latitude, the political agency, the free will as a human being to say, no, I'm not going to vote with my party on this issue. I'm going to vote against it. Now, you may be reprimanded by the party whip, and you might get kicked out of caucus, but if it comes down to something that's really important at an important moment, like say lockdowns, masking, mandates on vaccines, things like that, if you don't really agree with what the government, with what your party even in power, if you're the governing party, if you don't agree with them, you have the ability, you have the choice as a sitting member of Parliament to walk away and vote with your conscience, with logic, to represent your constituents and maybe even the rest of Canada, if you choose to, if you have the spine, the courage to stand up and do the right thing when it really counts. The problem we've run into is that those kind of people are few and far between, especially in politics, because they're afraid of the consequences of floor crossing. And the weird thing is, the people out there right now who have been complaining about the floor crossing are the same very people, a lot of them, who were calling on MPs and MPPs and MLAs and even local councillors to stand up when we needed them. Point is, we're going through a period where we really need to get a handle on what's going on, get a clear perspective on how things work, and people don't really understand because we're being, especially in Alberta, you've got people leading the charge on breaking up the country who haven't been honest with us from the beginning. Look at the people who are involved. It's the same people that have been popping up for the past few years. And all these, with one issue to the next issue, to the next issue, to the next issue. Duping people, pawning, using people as pawns. And now, and every step of the way, throwing some kind of a temper tantrum. The child of Canada is acting, at least not all the Albertans, not by a long shot, but these people want you to follow their lead out there in Alberta and throw a childish temper tantrum. They're acting like a spoiled child. Alberta is a child of Canada. With that in mind, we're going to go to our Maverick Midnight Matinee feature presentation tonight. When we come back on the other side of this, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll have to jump off there and go and join us over on our Rumble channel tonight, because we don't run Maverick Midnight Matinee on YouTube. They don't like it when we do that over there for some reason. But we will be running on Rumble and all of the other social media platforms, including X, where we broadcast live every night. So stay with me. When we come back, I'll tell you what tonight's feature presentation is. It won't be a long one. It's a short television episode, half hour in length. So it won't keep you up till midnight tonight, but it's an oldie but a goodie. And I think that the message that it sends will be of value.